Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this breakout session. It's great to have all you folks here. Wow, what a showing. I'm Max. My name's Max Guttman, and
Hi, I'm Dan Frey.
yeah, Dan. And we're here to talk about lived experience. You folks do that a lot as peers. And this basically is a presentation. We'll get to the nitty gritty, but it's basically a presentation in how to talk about your lived experience in a professional way. Hey, we just keep our mics muted for a little bit until we finish our introduction. And I think you'll find that the conversation will grow organically as we go along. So that we're going to stop at some points. We're going to talk, and then you'll sort of get into the flow of how the conversation goes, I think. But if anyone ever needs to interrupt me, please, you could raise your hand for now until it becomes more of a conversation. But let's begin. So formally, I'd like to just start by sharing my screen. Share my PowerPoint at least. So play from start. Dan, can you see my screen?
I can see it.
All right, great. All right, so folks, again, welcome to Editorializing Lived Experience, creating an authentic voice and impactful message in professional writing. So this was prepared for today. Again, I'm Max, and we have Dan. And just to get started, who we are and what we do, so you know why we're speaking with you and why we have credence in this area or this expertise, or else why would we be talking? Or at least why would we be talking right now? So I teach family therapy to social work students. I also have a blog, and I write for a couple other blogs. I love mental health. I have my own lived experience with mental health. I've written a couple books, sit in a couple committees, and I'm very passionate about writing. And I'm very passionate about writing about my lived experience. And how I do that and why I do that and the way I do that is going to hopefully help you folks today learn how to do that a little bit better. So Dan?
Hi, my name is Dan Frey. I'm the director of City Voices media and community building project. And the media part is we have like a lot of periodicals and a website and a Facebook page. And I've been doing a lot of editing and writing like over the years, like almost 15 years for City Voices. So I hope that experience helps with this presentation.
And it will. All right, so let's start with a little bit of quote to meditate on, and then we're gonna have a little bit of a discussion after. All right, so this is a quote by one of my favorite authors. His name is Roland Barthes. Okay, it's from The Death of the Author. So Roland Barthes was a literary critic. Basically, a literary critic means that he talks about what people write, and he has a lot to say about it. Okay. And we're going to talk about why that's important later. But his quote is, "The birth of the reader must come at the death of the author." What do you folks think that means? Let's talk about that for a second. Does anyone have an idea what that might mean? The birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of the author. That's a pretty bold statement if you think about it.
Should we unmute, folks?
Yeah, does anyone have any ideas on what that might mean? We'll unmute you.
Does it mean that once the individual passes on, they become more popular, or people kind of look into their work more when they're dead than alive?
Absolutely, that's a great interpretation. So once something is written, or once someone writes something and dies, their work becomes like more important, more looked into, more valued. That's definitely a part of what this is about.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Oh, so I was thinking maybe that it has to do with interpretation. And so irrespective of what the author intended, whatever the reader interprets, that's what the life of the life interpretation is. The life. I don't know.
Absolutely, I think you hit that spot on.
Yeah.
So like when someone puts something out there, like you're saying, then it becomes a matter of interpretation. the reader, right, is going to interpret what you write any which way. Okay. And that's a big part of our conversation, or at least a big thing to remember as this conversation evolves. A little bit of an aside, okay? So I don't want to talk too much about, so for example, I've written a lot myself, right? And a little bit about how Dan and I met. I think this personal story is going to be great, Dan. I'm ad-libbing here, but Dan, before he met me, read some of my work, okay? And he's like, who's this guy, right? Who's this guy? Let me check him out. And when he's talking to me, he goes, Max, it says here something about guns and this and that. Are you for this or for that? And I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't mean that at all. But he's interpreting it a certain way based on what I wrote. And I remember calling my friends. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Dan is saying this and saying that. And like, well, you wrote that. You have to remember, he's going to interpret it a certain way. Now, let's keep in mind that, you know, there's grammar, there's delivery, there's all these aspects of writing. But when you're writing, you have to make sure your message is clear. And how clear your message is going to impact who you're writing for and what they interpret. So like, there are ways of writing very concisely. Maybe the interpretation can't go too far out there, but you know, if you're not writing in a concise way, it can be interpreted a lot of different ways. So someone is requesting remote access to my screen. Joel, I'm going to decline that for now. Okay.
Okay.
So, objectives for this workshop. What are we going to accomplish here? All right. So very, very briefly, we're going to be talking about our lived experience in a professional way. So a few different mediums, newspapers, journal articles, blogs. And the theory behind all this is when you're going about talking about your lived experience, you pick the best way of doing it. Best for you, right? And what you set out to accomplish. So whether that be a blog or a journal, you're going to figure out the best way of saying and talking about your stuff, given your experience and given your goal and what you want to achieve with what you write. Okay, so we're gonna talk. You folks will be able to write a little bit on your own. So if you have a pen and paper or a computer, you certainly probably have a computer or a phone, right? And you're gonna use those to write a little bit, and we'll review it together, and we'll talk about how that works and how you feel about it. All right, how's that sound, everybody?
Really good.
All right, cool, great. All right, so objectives continued. All right, so basically by the end of this workshop, we're going to be able to write about your stuff, pick the best approach for doing it, and understand that a lot of this has to do with self-disclosure too, meaning you're going to be able to decipher what pieces of your story are either most important for delivering your message, or maybe what you want to hold back because maybe it's too personal, or maybe it's not going to add the right flavor to your writing. So we're going to figure out what that means and how to do that. All right, so I'm going to switch over to Dan for a second.
Oh, okay. The importance of self-reflection.
Yeah.
Well, you know, writing your personal stories about your personal journey in life. It's not just about focusing on when you hit rock bottom, but you could talk about that too. It's about what you learned, you know, the mistakes you made, what you learned from those mistakes, and some of your successes and what that was like. Maybe you have some achievements that you're proud of. And the people who came into your life, that's so important too. Family, teachers, public figures, friends, you know, what you learned from books and film, what you know, all that stuff that you incorporated into your morality and ideology and making you the personality that you are. And what you learned from all those collective experiences, that's part of the writing and self-reflecting in the personal story.
Great. All right. Oop, did we go too far? think we did. All right. Here you go, Dan.
Okay. Modeling good health for other peers. Okay. Let's see. All right, now, there's so many ways to do this, and maybe, some people feel like maybe they're not in a good place where they can model anything, and that's okay too. And still, those stories are important too, even if you feel like you haven't like risen out of, broken out of that cocoon. But if you're in a good place, then that can model good health, as we say. So, what has worked for you that has helped you to rise up and like, and to come into your own. That could be, I mean, some people feel that clinical interventions are like the #1 best thing that ever happened to them after they got, quote unquote sick. But some people feel that non-clinical interventions such as like yoga, exercise, being spiritual, believing in God, engaging with friends and being social, like some people feel that's even more important than the meds and the therapy and what have you. And all of those experiences are completely equally important. And it's just that we in your personal story, you're sharing what helped you to live as fully as possible in your recovery. And maybe some things did not work out so well for you. That could have been clinical. That could have been something else that didn't work. That's part of the story too.
Right, exactly. The important part is that you know what works. Because if you don't know what works, then what's the point of talking about it? I guess we could talk about all these things that don't work. It's going to be a very sad article. But, the important part is that you know what works for you to help you get better and do what you do and help other people. And we'll talk about that. So there are approaches to talking about your lived experience. And this is where I'd like to start having a little conversation after each of these points. Because the approaches, right, is what it's all about. And how you approach talking about things. Especially in your work, right, as peers, how you approach what you do, all that stuff. So there are poetic approaches. You're going to write poetry. You're going to write prose. It's going to be written like in paragraph form and very linear. I did this and I did that. Or is it nonlinear? And you're going to speak in tangents. What's the best way of getting your story across and the message across, given what happened to you? Okay? So an aside for me, so to sort of launch our conversation, I had a very psychotic experience. I experienced first episode, psychosis, that clinical term there. But in non-clinical terms, I didn't know what was happening to me, and I was very confused, and it was very scary, and a lot was happening that I thought was happening that wasn't happening, however you want to talk about it. So when I talk about my lived experience, I'm not very poetic, and certainly I'm not going to speak in tangents. Part of that's out of fear, because I think if I speak tangentially, right, and I don't speak, I did this and I did that, people will think maybe I'm still this or that way, or a certain way. So maybe out of fear, and a little bit, honestly, out of pride in knowing I am okay, I speak in a very concise, regimented sort of way, so no one can really say, hey, what's going on with that guy? That's just, again, how I do things. Maybe that approach will change. Maybe as I come more into myself later on in life, right, I'll be more poetic and speak very flowery, but not now, not yet. So what's the best way of getting your message across, considering what you want to share? Let's talk about that, folks. What's the best way of getting your message across? What happened to you?
Max, can I bring something up here?
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting. It's in the chat.
Great.
Angela says she doesn't like the word prosumer.
Uh-huh.
Is that, and she wants to know if that means professional consumer.
So, my definition of prosumer, the way that I like to think of the word is, yes, professional consumer, someone with lived experience who also works professionally in their given field of study. And Angela, you said, Dan,
Yeah.
to talk about that further, maybe come off mic or out of the message box and elaborate.
Okay. Can Angela unmute herself? Is that possible?
I have to find myself first.
Oh.
Hey, Angela.
Hey, you're unmuted. You're unmuted, Angela. You can talk.
Yeah, prosumer, I mean, years ago, that would mean a professional consumer, someone who is constantly in the system. Like that was their profession, to be a consumer of mental health services. And that was before we even started talking about recovery and getting beyond that.
Sure.
So to me, the word prosumer goes way back.
Oh, it's a dated
And
term.
it doesn't mean what you're taking it to mean.
Oh, no. Well, it means what I would like it to mean and how I claim it, Angela. So there's also a theory that we could take words, dated terms, and reclaim them to mean something better than what they meant before. Because if we have all this language that gets wrecked over time by bad instances and ill history, we won't have language, Angela. That's at least my opinion. So what I like to do is I like to take these words, reclaim them, and put them into a positive perspective. Because I do think the term can speak to my definition as well. Because we all have multiple interpretations, right, of definitions and what words mean and how language works, really. Or at least that's how it works.
You know, Max, one of the things that really bothers me these days is the National Association of Peer Specialists, NAPS.
Okay.
Back in the day, when Judy Chamberlain and Ray Unziger were alive, we had an organization called NAPS. In fact, I still have the T-shirt from it.
Okay.
And that stood for the National Association of Psychiatric Survivors, which is quite different from peer specialists. That was back when we had no idea that a peer specialist would actually become a career path.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And, you know, as history evolves and time marches on, I think language evolves in how we use words. And how we use words now is different than we used them 20 years ago or 40 years ago. And I think that
40 years ago.
Right? And that speaks to, I think that's a great thing. I think it's a great thing that meaning sort of, you know, evolves over time and expands. Because if we have all these narrow definitions and we stick to that, our focus is going to be narrow, right? And I think that if we have multiple interpretations, that's the healthiest, most diverse way of communicating. That's just my opinion, though. And I appreciate yours.
Thank you.
I do. Thank you.
All right, we have to keep it rolling.
Sure. Roll away. So based, and this piggies back off our conversation, Angela. Will you use medical or psychiatric language to talk about your symptoms? Will you go outside the medical model? Will you take my prosumer approach? Again, mine and the way I think of the definition. Or will you take an expanded definition? Will you reassign words? How are you going to do this? What type of words do you think you're going to use to talk about what happened to you? Anybody? What kind of language are you going to use? What kind of words?
Oh, you want to open it up again now?
I would love to open it up for that one last question. Yes.
First person language.
First person right here. So like I did this or I did that, sort of.
Yeah, like having, you know, in sorry about that.
That's
My
okay.
my dog.
Sort of like
Having like compassion and having having compassion and having an open dialogue with people, like a first person language,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah. So keeping it very like, this was my experience. If this happened to me, that's a good way of not putting your stuff, right, and saying you had that experience too, right?
Yeah, like not one shoe, no, not one size fits all.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's definitely a solid approach to not putting your stuff and your experience and saying other people have the same one. Because I can tell you, I've read a lot of that out there. Well, that didn't happen to me. My experience was different. What are you talking about? You know? Oh my God. Ever have that? That's, we'll talk about all about self-disclosure, but that's definitely a great way of keeping it very, this was my experience, what's yours? I like that. Thank you.
And
You're welcome. Thank you.
Can we go to Philip? And I see a few people have unmuted, and Philip
Great.
has his hand raised. If
Awesome.
you'd like to speak, please put your hand up and I can go through. So Philip?
Hi, first of all, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Cool. So I guess when I write, not only do I use the first person, but I also use words like, I think, I feel, I believe, just so that, what I'm saying is, I don't want to say like, my experience is like gospel or absolute truth, but I'm actually stating my own thoughts, feelings and opinions for people to think about, not necessarily to, accept, what I've written, but, just, material, for people to think about.
Oh, that's awesome, Philip. So it sort of brings other people into your experience, right? It brings them into your feelings, right? And your thoughts, and it doesn't force them because they don't have to read it, but it certainly allows them to sit with it and get to know your experience a little bit better by really articulating how you felt and what you thought at the time. That's great. That's wonderful. Anybody else?
Yeah. Oh. I'd like to say that I have written my experience through poetry, and also I think I believe in my experience that's unique to me. I don't really like try to blanket.
Okay. So you must be very
blanket
comfortable with
my
yourself.
experience.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. I
Yeah.
just by saying you talk right poetry, I'm like, okay, this person is comfortable with who they are, what they do, and their story, and that's really remarkable. And I wish other people were as comfortable with themselves, including me, as you are. So
Can I say something?
we applaud you. We
Thank
applaud
you.
you.
I've been editing a lot of stories over the years, and yes, like there's individual aspects to a lot of the stories, like
Right.
about about personal experiences and writing from the I, and this is what happened to me. But looking at all of them, as I've had the privilege to do, there are also a lot of strings, a lot of commonalities, and I think that's what is so important about the personal story, is that when someone out in the world, maybe it's someone who picks it up in a hospital or is in another setting, maybe in the clinic, or I don't know where they are. Maybe they're at home looking at the internet and feeling lonely and not feeling good, and they read a personal story, and it connects, it resonates, because yes, it's individual, it's about you, but it's also about like the collective experience too. A lot of people see a lot of similarities to their own lives.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And when you use poetry to reach that broad audience, it's like saying, I am this unique, and all you folks are able to connect with me. I think it's sort of it speaks to how the singular and the plural connect and through language, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Anybody else before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, hi, that, you know, speaking with sincerity from the heart is really important. That, you know, it has to go beyond our intellectual self-assessment and go to, you know, the reality and the sincerity. So.
When you say reality and sincerity, it means the reality of your experience
Yes,
or the
and
reality of the world around us now,
the reality of the experience
right?
and the sincerity of your emotions and
Absolutely. Because if we're not authentic, right, that's a big part of this. If we're not authentic about what happened to us and we're sort of like glib or jokish or we don't take it seriously, how can we ever expect other people to take it seriously? Or get from our story what they truly need to. Because if you don't have respect and own your story in a very, very authentic way, and you are who you were, and you put yourself back there in a very, well, this was me, this is really who I was, how do you feel about it now? People might not, might not put that value in your story, you know? So it's very important to be authentic at all times, right? Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else?
Lisa has her hand raised.
Great.
I'm just not, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. I just wanted to say that it is also very difficult to begin telling your own story, the process of telling it. It can really be how to begin it to so the reader understands where you're going. So for instance, it could be kind of painful to an individual who's just starting to write, as I have experienced in the past, writing about my own self and my situation. It was hard to write about myself, and I became more emotional. So I think we have to all be in that particular. We have to be one with it and keep those emotions in there, but it's also, you know, a difficult time to get past the first, you know, lines or such about yourself.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Not only is there like a readiness piece to all this, but I would almost say like it's about being comfortable with ourselves and what happened to us and our story before we can ever expect anyone to ever be comfortable with reading it. And what I'm trying to say there is if you're not comfortable with who you are, it's going to reflect in your writing. And people, you know, people will be like, oh, okay, so what are you really trying to say here? Or are you, you know, like, was there healing here or what? Because, like, if you're not comfortable with who you are, how do you reflect in the right way, right? And then how do you write in the right way? It's all very beguiling. The idea is you have to be comfortable with your story and yourself as a peer, right? And the message you want to get out there for other people to connect with you on that level, that authentic level we were talking about.
Yes.
And make it work, you know? Great.
Thank you.
Excellent point. Excellent.
And we do acknowledge that this work of putting together a personal story and going to those sometimes very dark places, you know, if you're not ready to go there, or you don't even have to discuss it, you could discuss it on the surface without delving too deep. There is value in going deep, but it could be very challenging. And pace yourself. You know, you know, you don't have to write it in 24 hours. It could take years to put a good personal story together, but we're going to try.
Thank you.
Right, and that's a whole presentation right there, Lisa. Like you touched on a major subject. This really is how to write how to write in a certain way given what happened to you. You're talking about how you get ready and prepare yourself to even get there. That's definitely another. I'd love to have that conversation maybe next year, because that's a very visceral, real experience too. And I applaud anyone, including yourself, who's walking that journey now.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, folks, that brings us to the importance of self-reflection.
I think we did this one, Max. Yeah, I did this one.
Well, we did a long time ago. Look at that.
Yeah.
Well, harkening back. Memories, huh, folks? All right. All right, so let's go back 2 slides to self-disclosure. All right. So this is a little bit about what we were talking about too, in terms of self-disclosure. So self-disclosure, folks, is really, to break it down, what parts of yourself you disclose to other people? What parts of yourself do you give to other people and share with them? Okay? So are there parts of your story that you want to keep personal, right? Maybe you're not ready to talk about that yet. Or maybe you haven't reflected on that yet. You'll talk about it later. You're building there. So again, it's like that where do you want to begin piece. You want to talk about where you are now and work to that maybe core trauma later. Are you gonna maybe have a plan for your articles? Well, I want to talk about this part of my experience now, and I'll work to that deep trauma later, and I'll work through it through a series of articles. Maybe I'll talk about 1 year, and then the following year, maybe there'll be a timeline. Maybe there won't. So the important part is, what about your story do you want to express? What's the most important part there that gets the right message across, given what you're willing to share? So how will you handle questions about your lived experience as applies to peer work in the field? How will you do that? So like, what we're trying to ask here is, would you like to elaborate on that, Dan? I think you'd be best for that.
Bullet number 2, how will you handle questions about the relevance of your lived experience as it applies to peer work in the field? Okay, when you're working as a peer worker, there comes this time where you have to figure out if it's the right moment, if it's the right situation where you're going to disclose your own and share your own personal experiences with someone that you're working with. That is a challenge to really be in the moment and
figure out when it's the right time. Like, that's a gut feeling. That's something you sort of have to we don't like to use the word assess as peers, but that's something you have to figure out as you go along, right? Like, I mean, I've had lots of conversation with you, Dan, right? Where I'm like, wait, maybe this isn't the right time to share this piece, or maybe that's not relevant to our discussion right now. I'd love to talk to you about all of it, but maybe now's not the right time. Or maybe when we talk about this subject, I could bring that piece in. And that's, all these interconnections in our history and what's going on now and our experience. That's the hard part, right? Figuring out how our experience connects to what's going on in the peer world now, right? Because, right, like, people want to hear about current issues, but you're talking about your past experiences. So how do you make the past connect with today in a meaningful way?
If
right?
the person that you're working with is going through a really difficult emotional, psychic experience, and you feel that your personal journey and having had similar experiences can be helpful and really build that rapport and that bond with the person that you're providing peer support to, then you just have to listen to your heart in situations like that. And sometimes maybe writing your personal story ahead of time, maybe that can prepare you for situations like that.
Absolutely. And again, it's about promoting change, right? We're reformers. We're here to help people change, right? In their own way. Maybe they don't want to change, maybe they just want to feel a certain way. There's going to be some sort of transformation, right? So part of, like we said, history, right? These old terms, these new words, these old words in new ways. Part of diversity, right, is taking dated stuff, maybe our dated history, stuff that wasn't right with us, and making it right now. We do that through connections, and establishing and identifying that connection allows us to make that change, right? So that's how the past connects with the present. And again, people may have had a different experience than you. But the idea is they want to learn how to change too. They want to experience that transformational growth, right? And your story is different, but they want to do the same thing. And that's why diversity is important, because there are connections between us that are real, right? Especially as peers. Okay. So that brings us to a brief story about struggle and recovery. Let's watch it.
Can you maximize it, Max?
Yep.
Max.
Max.
I was born in India, and I was pretty much brought up and raised there for
Let's
most
leave
of
it
my
here.
life. So when I was very young, I was moving from one part of the city to the other. So my dad had to move me to this big private school. So when I moved to that school, I was often bullied because I had severe weight issues when I was little, and it was really hard for me to fit in. But that didn't matter because I still had my dad with me. He was like my best friend. He often took me to bookstores on the weekends, and we'd read. Basically, sitting with him and just reading was some of the best memories I'll ever have with my father. But unfortunately, this didn't last long. When I was in the 4th grade, my dad passed away, and that was the worst moment in my entire life. That day was when everything came crashing down. Not only did I lose a father, but I lost a best friend as well. After my dad passed away, I didn't know how to go on with life. I was just so little, and I didn't understand anything. My family was getting so upset. We started having financial issues. It was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. And that was kind of where my depression started. I really didn't see the point to living anymore. And the years went on after my dad's death, and my depression started to get worse, and my self-worth started to go really low. I often had suicidal thoughts, and there were moments when I just couldn't take it anymore. My mom remarried to this really horrible man who would often verbally and emotionally abuse me. That further contributed to my issues with depression and anxiety. And to make things worse, I hit puberty. I was really vulnerable, and I started hanging out with the wrong people, and I started getting into really bad things like drugs, and my life just couldn't go on anymore. One day I just decided to finally kill myself. I didn't want to face life anymore. But I had this fantasy of what would it be like if things were different. I kind of had like these fantasies of having friends and having a life that wasn't really shrouded with depression and other issues and stuff. I often had this thought in my mind, what if my life were different? What if I was given a chance to restart my life? What if I was given the chance to kind of go to a place where nobody would know me and I would live my life the way I want to? Those thoughts kind of just kept me through the night. When I went to school, I saw these posters for the study abroad program, which I gladly took on. Now I live in Boston, and coming here was the best decision that I've ever made. Now I'm actually got the chance to restart my life. Depression is still a major part of my life, but I've come to a point where it's not as significant anymore. I still do struggle with it, but now it's come to a point where I can control it. And I have friends, and I'm surrounded by people who love me and just give me positive thoughts. And I'm finally doing something that I love with my life. I'm in college, my grades are good, and it's like I finally saw the light to the end of my tunnel. Now it's like I've given a chance to relive my life, and I'm so thankful for that.
Wow. All right, so wait.
Let's go back to that video.
Yeah.
just this page.
Okay.
This is an example of a story of a recovery story. And I know that we're not all, teenagers like this young woman, and we all have. But it's interesting because her story, she shares her culture. She shares in the beginning, like her father kept her grounded despite the slings and arrows that she was experiencing in her life at school and with bullying and all that sort of thing. And then when she hit rock bottom after her father died, sometimes we have a life situation that causes us to get, really disjointed. And sometimes it happens and it's not really clear what the reason is that we're suffering. But in this story, it's pretty clear that the loss of her father, she couldn't hold on. And that's when her experience started. And then it got worse. There was abuse when her mother remarried, and so she describes the dark times. But then the interesting thing is, like, when she started to get a hold of herself, and I think she described, like, treatment helped her. It doesn't help everybody, but in this situation, it's like a treatment success story. The interesting thing is, like, toward the end of the story, she said, hey, she still suffers from depression. This is still a part of her life, but she's able to transform the way she experiences that, and she's not overwhelmed anymore, and she's able to live her life to the best she can, given what she's got to work with.
That's authentic, right? It's being real about your situation. Maybe some people don't want to admit to themselves, right, that, you know, there's still aspects of their situation that need improvement. But if you're authentic about it, and you have that awareness, right, that insight to yourself, and knowing, well, sure, maybe it's important that I talk about that too, right? The fact that I still have this room for growth, right? Because if people read your story and they see, well, there's still stuff going on there. Does that person realize that? Yeah, they do, and they're going to do more work, and that's a very important part too, right?
Max, why don't can we open it up to people
Love
who
that.
maybe they have, does anyone have any thoughts and feelings about this story, and like how, and if it's helpful in shaping your own personal story?
Right.
I can give it a gander. I can relate to parts of her story. You know, being a person of color, growing up in the South, you know, my family had, you know, certain expectations, you know, about what my life should be like, you know, once I become an adult. And I pretty much like kind of rejected all of that, you know, tradition, you know, Southern tradition within my family, you know. As far as they're concerned, you know, I've kind of broken all those, you know, unwritten rules, you know, when I moved away to start my own life. And, you know, it caused a lot of, you know, pain. You know, they literally, you know, disowned me because I made choices that, you know, they didn't agree with. And I've been spending a great deal of my life feeling, you know, feeling guilty, you know, about that. And I'm still struggling, you know, to a certain extent. However, you know, I don't apologize for my success and how far I've gotten so far in, you know, in my journey, because you know, at the end of the day, I took some risk, a lot of risk, and I made some decisions that, you know, for better or for worse, made me who the person that I am. And if I had to do it all over again, you know, as that 18-year-old,
oh, I'm
I
sorry,
would do it
Philip.
again.
Hi, Philip. Philip, if there's a message in your story, what is that message in your personal story, and who would you like to receive that message most of all?
I guess the message would be, gosh, I'm not really sure.
Well, that's okay. You don't. You know, when writing, like Max said earlier on in the presentation, sometimes we have a message that we want people to come out with after they read and process our stories. So it's just something to think about. But it does sound like the way you're talking about your story, it's like you have it already. You recognize your struggle and what you went through, and then you also recognize how far you've come, and that's pretty cool.
It's really wonderful. And first I want to applaud you in all your growth and acknowledging your growth. and knowing that you don't want to be apologetic about it. But at the same time, like you said, I think you talked about guilt of the rejection piece, and it was your family, and you had to do what you had to do. So like, it sounds also like there are points of your story with a lot of conflict, right? Self-conflict, maybe self-doubt, but also triumph, and also knowing you would do the same thing, I think, again, because look how far you've come. So you want to take those pieces, right? The conflict piece, all these critical pieces that like there's uncertainty around, but also at the same time, great achievement. And what do we call that? Literary world juxtaposition, right? Or things that are at converse with each other, at odds, but also very much when you talk about those things, it illuminates them and makes it more visible to the reader. So you want to take those important critical pieces and think about them carefully, because when you tell your story, it's going to be those pieces that really take bring home your message. That's what Dan's talking about too. It's going to be those critical points, shoring them up, making sure that they're very clear, and getting it out there so the reader understands your message in the best way possible. So he hears and reads your struggle and your conflict. Because that's what makes the authenticity piece real and your story real to the reader. Thank you. I think we should move along. Did you say, Dan?
I said yes. Let's keep going.
Oh, great. And that brings us to the
writing exercise.
Oh God, yeah, here we are. Are you folks ready? Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Woo!
All right, I think they're ready. This is your piece, Dan. Take it along.
Oh, okay. So let's see. So it's time to start, if you're willing, just, whatever you feel comfortable, just part of the intro to your story, maybe an outline. We're going to take the next 15 to 20 minutes to write it, like maybe an outline or a draft of the beginnings of a story, the beginnings, and then we'll share later on. Try to utilize the various approaches that Max talked about. You can keep in mind the approach that the person in the video took. Consider if you have a message and you know it, boom, that's beautiful. That can be incorporated. But if you don't, that's okay too, because sometimes the story is just a story and it doesn't have a message, or at least it doesn't have an intentional message. Because remember, like what one of the first slides was a quote, about the death of the author, and that means whatever you intended, it's gonna change. Like with every reader, they're gonna have their own interpretation. Yeah. So, but try to stay true to yourself and what you want to come across. Don't even think about you're gonna be it's gonna be the death of you as an author. Just try to produce something if you can. Always keep in mind. Okay, we've said that. Okay. So I don't. Do you have anything to add to that, Max? Before we ask people to start writing?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can't write a whole thing or a little thing, maybe just a list of further questions to get your piece started. So like if you have all these questions that are like, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? And then you can start writing. Ask us those questions. We're happy to field them. And then take your writing from there, right? So that's
all right, Max. It's 10:35 now. Mm-hmm. So in 15 minutes, that'll be 10:50. Can you play some like relaxing music? Like some meditational stuff?
Sure.
Or should I do that? Maybe I should.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, okay.
I got a lot of rock going on here and jamming music. I don't know if it's gonna work for this. It might for you. But yeah, let's.
Oh well, hold on. If I do it, That's gonna stop the screen sharing.
All right, so let's let them just, they can get this. They got this.
All right,
And,
I guess we're
yeah.
enjoy the silence like Depeche Mode
Well,
used
I
to say.
actually have soothing music on in the background. You folks, do you hear this?
Oh, that's nice.
Perfect, right? What was I talking about? I had it on the whole time. Anyway, so let's take a couple minutes to do this. Maybe 10 minutes, right? Depending on how much time we have left.
Okay, we have a lot of, we finished at 11:15, so we have like,
Take the full 15. All right, Dan. I
yeah.
know we have someone who's eager to go first.
Okay. So Eric Simolchik, is that how you pronounce your name?
Hi, yes, it is.
Okay.
That was actually very impressive because most people don't get it right on the first try, so thank you. Yeah, I was very interested in taking this seminar today. I recently became a peer bridger in January of this year. I work for Community Access at the Adult Home Initiative. And yeah, I just wanted to share this because a lot of the things that I've heard from Max and Dan today, I think maybe I could benefit a little more, just this brief sample. So please bear with me. Thank you. The air was warm, the mood was friendly, the sort of night in Venice Beach that you dream of. Sometimes dreams become nightmares in the blink of an eye. My friend and I turned the corner to head to Danielle's surprise birthday party, laughing as good friends do when you are having one of those beautiful summer nights. Little did we know that 4 gang members laid in wait. Unfortunately for us, it was initiation night, Memorial Day weekend. The knife came from behind like a ghost whisper in my ear. I didn't feel it go in as I turned to defend myself. All my strength seemed to disappear with all the uncertainty about what had just happened. I survived the attack. Most people don't. That is where my lived experience with PTSD, followed by major depression and general anxiety began. I am still here. I never wanted to call myself a victim. I want to call myself a survivor.
That's great.
That is powerful.
That's good. Can I just say a few words, Dan?
Yeah, of course.
So I applaud your bravery in sharing that with us, and it really speaks to a few of the things that we were talking about. So you took an experience, you put it into context, right? You had a very linear way of talking about it, but you also had some prose and poetry mixed together, and you took a few of the aspects, blended them, almost blended. You put like a diagnosis in there, but at the same time how you really identify, and then really gave it that twist at the end of the value of your story and your reflection and your epiphany, and how others can maybe take that turn and apply it to whatever situation is going on in their lives and understand how they can see that differently. So that was really, really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just thought the tone was like super chill, and it was like so relaxing, and I really felt like I was at the beach with you. So I think your language is very vivid and poetic. It's kind of nice. It's like listening to jazz.
Thank you. Jazz is one of my favorite musical genres along with soul, so I appreciate that.
So we're going to give information in a couple slides from here how people can write, and they can write anonymously. You don't, because you know some of this, sometimes the story will go could go on the web, and some people don't want to be known by, you know, don't want those personal experiences shared in that way. So anonymous submission is totally acceptable, a pen name or whatever. Or if you want to go, if you do want to like disclose, then that's also like a powerful decision you can make. So let's hear from other people. So who else? Oh, Lisa Corso has raised her hand.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Is a poem okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, okay. One by one, each one of these tablets, blue, orange, green, white, pink, oval, small circle, big circle, and oblong circle, have been swallowed for over 3 decades. The poison feeds the ulcerating organ to live one more day. I'm done.
Wow.
Yeah, I would have to hear that again. I'm sorry.
You talking about medication?
Max, it's a short poem. Can we hear it one more time?
Sure.
Can you say that that poem one more time?
Yes, yes. One by one, each one of these tablets, blue, orange, green, white, pink, oval, small circle, big circle, and oblong circle, have been swallowed for over 3 decades. The poison feeds the ulcerating organ to live one more day.
Okay. All right.
So you're talking about medication, but not, right?
I am.
I'm playing the reader.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah, because
yes.
now it's up
Well,
to
I'm glad to
interpretation.
see that. It's medicine. Yes.
Right. So what are you telling us? I'm playing the reader again. What are you telling us here? What's going on?
That without having this medication, I would probably die.
Yeah. That's what I got from it, honestly.
Thank you.
I wasn't being like, you know, I was just being that like devil's advocate.
Oh, no.
But I really got that. So, you know, it was pretty clear in the final piece, part of your piece. And you know, this brings us to a very important part. Like sometimes people will be critics and like say things just to say it. And it could be their stuff that's making him say it, or like maybe they know you and just want to slant you. Like people are gonna say things for a lot of reasons, right? We're peers, but we are also human. So like we know people talk to talk sometimes, and maybe there's no value in what they have to say, and they just want to be mean or they just want to be that. So that's why part of this piece is about preparedness, and like I knew what that was about, but I was being that like, well, what are you saying here?
Max, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we only have 15 minutes. Isn't that right?
Sure.
Wait, Curtis, we have only 15 minutes. Is that correct?
Is
Correct. 11:15. Yeah.
Okay, I want to do just nonstop back to back.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Who wants to go next?
I like to go.
Go for it.
All right. I was born in the South Bronx in 1955. Growing up in those days, people didn't have, at least my family didn't have, an understanding of mental illness. I grew up not knowing what depression was. Now looking back, I kind of think I was depressed even as a child. I guess the domestic violence in my household played a part in my depression. I cried a lot and also escaped by acting like nothing even happened. This was my normal. Playing outside with laughter and joy and when time permitted it, only to face the same circumstance again and again. Periods of joy and happiness followed by fear and anxiety, wonder what kind of condition my father would come home, what kind of condition my father would come home, happy or angry.
Thank you, Nathan. That's a good start. That's a good beginning. You starting in your childhood, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the main. That's like a lot of people write in like they call it like a linear fashion, starting at the beginning and then working up to like modern times, and that's a good way to do it. Max, do you have any comments?
No, maybe we should keep going, but that was excellent, excellent.
All right, thank you, Nathan. Let's keep going.
All right.
Who would like to go next?
Can I go?
Yes.
Okay. My mood fluctuated from desperately sad to invincible, sometimes within the same day. When I decided to kill myself, I became elated. A calm came over me, and everything that happened that day seemed to confirm I made the right decision. Now I'm glad to be alive, and that's confirmed every day.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Who would like to go next?
I'd like to. How does an open, energetic little girl end up extremely quiet, withdrawn, and sullen? My parents had a rocky marriage. Their fights would scare me to the point I would think they were going to really get physical and hurt each other. I remember sitting in a corner between the kitchen and hallway crying, thinking they are going to hurt each other. I wanted my parents to get along with each other, to love each other, not fight. I would feel anxious and sad that they couldn't get along.
Yeah, that's another good beginning from childhood. Okay, and later on we're gonna put some information. Would everybody, like, I would like to, Max, can you go like a slide or two ahead, like where we put the information on how they can
give a head start? Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, I think this has the email address, right?
Right here. Yeah.
Okay, so you can read this and hopefully, also put your email into the chat. Please put your email into the chat. Can you put the last slide, Max?
Absolutely.
Because if you put your email into the chat, we can send you information on the Peer Workers United support group that meets every other Thursday, and also an invitation to City Voices 25th anniversary. It's a free event on Facebook. And also at the bottom, you can email Max to write for his blog. So take down this information, mentalhealthaffairs.blog, and Maxwell Guttman, that's Max, right? And Max hosting. I just want to say thank you, Max, for putting so much work into this presentation. Max did the lion's share of the work, so we have him to thank for this. But okay, so that's that. And please put your email in the chat. Let's hear from the next person who wants to share their story.
I would.
Go ahead.
I'm a survivor. I was born and raised a depressed alcoholic. Joined the Army, got married, and had 4 kids. I tried to make my kids' childhood much better than mine, and I succeeded. Growing up, I felt unloved, unnoticed, and shamed. The sex abuse started at a very young age. I did not know that it would consume my life. I did not know I was traumatized. I did not know I was self-medicating. What in the world was wrong with me? I searched the world. I searched for what was making me self-medicate. A psychologist once said, when I was 26, most girls that grow up like you are alcoholics. What a release of shame, both for my drinking and my depression. It took me years to stop the drinking. I was in denial about the depression for years. That's it.
Thank you for that bravery, the bravery to share that experience with us. Does anyone else have a
Thank you.
story?
That was wonderful. Oh my God.
And maybe we should say something about trauma.
That's kind of what my story was about. I'd be happy to share.
Oh, go for it.
Awesome.
Okay. So I'll just read it. Children cannot comprehend much of the world around them, and when things do not feel right for a long time, there is confusion and uncertainty about who to trust. I grew up in a nuclear family home and had everything I needed: food, clothing, shelter, and then some. Despite this, witnessing, hearing, and experiencing repeated traumatic experiences through my childhood left me feeling unsafe at home and unable to trust my caregivers with how I was feeling. Through the years, I felt an emotional blockage, and I never had anyone to nurture my emotional or spiritual growth. As I continued to get older, I had this belief that I could not trust the adults in my life, and I had a lot of problems with authority figures. I developed a chronic undiagnosed depression from the age of 12 that carried on through my mid-20s, with the underlying emotions of this depression being anger and sadness. I was prone to rageful outbursts that caused property damage to my parents' home, but I never laid a hand on another person. Due to this depression, I was unfocused in school, had poor familial relationships that were rooted in their fear of me, and I felt I had no one to confide in, and I used any external stimulus to keep me distracted. At the age of 18, I decided to go into art therapy and have continued to engage in this to this day, and I'm nearly 30. The process in art therapy has been one of self-discovery, posing existential questions and building awareness of my trauma patterns and learning to move those feelings with the use of visual art, sculpting, and writing. I've learned that the experiences of our childhood and the messages we get from our caregivers carry us throughout our entire lives. The emotional roadmaps that are created from our childhood due to traumatic events and mental illness are not the end of the line, though. The level of courage and commitment we make to learn about the past and how it plays out in the present is directly related to the level of wellness we experience to this day.
Excellent.
That's lovely.
Really good.
You know, there's a theme with all our stories, and that is, you know, like feeling like we're really alone in the universe. No one can understand. No one. But the thing is, people can understand. But the stories that you share are understood by some people who are reading them. They're really understood and appreciated. Who would like to go next?
How much time do we have, Dan?
We have 7 minutes.
I can go, but this is still like a work in progress.
Sure.
In the midst of struggle, heartache, loss, betrayal, and disappointment, it can be difficult at times to find the strength and motivation to keep going in life. This country is currently undergoing the worst economic, social, political, physical health, and mental health crises that has ever been experienced in history. The level of despair amongst the people of this nation is at a historical high. However, I am so thankful and grateful for the countless thousands of people from all walks of life who are not only taking notice of all that is happening, but are also willing to both talk about the events of the past and present honestly and candidly, and are willing to become a part of the solution. Unfortunately, the disconnects that millions have been engulfed into, some longer than others, has left thousands more in dire straits, feeling like their hope is gone or at least greatly diminished. How can we, the people of this great nation, collectively and individually return to a place of mutual respect, transparency, accountability, civility, genuine connection, hope, and success? And that's all I have so far.
Well, that's a darn good question to ask. And thank you for sharing that. And yes, these are interesting times. Who would like to go next? We have time for like one or two more, I think.
Dan, if no one wants to share, there were a few questions in the chat.
Oh, okay, good. What were those questions?
Well, there was a lot of talk, and if you guys want to talk a little bit about what's the intention of self-disclosure, and there's a lot of conversation about, you know, how people should think about the intention of self-disclosure in their writing, and what role that plays, to be very you know, clear on what is the point of the self-disclosure. If you guys want to, you know, say any comments about how to kind of think about self-disclosure and people's intention.
Well, there's self-disclosure in writing, and there's self-disclosure in person. Self-disclosure in person is something that you just have to sort of go with your heart and feel out a situation when you're a working peer specialist and you're working with people, peers who might be having a hard time and really need to feel that their experience is understood. And that's when self-disclosure in person can happen, the sharing of experiences. Self-disclosure in writing is what we have been doing this morning, hearing these stories, self-disclosure about the trauma that we've experienced, about our early lives and growing up. You know, even in the poem about medication, that self-disclosure that these are the pills that are having an effect on me. Max, would you like to say something about me?
Sure. And I just crystallized, I heard that word intent used. So when I hear as intent, I think of what's the point or our intention, and that's the message. So what we choose to disclose should be congruent, right? Fit our message. So if you want to get a message, send a message across that medication's bad, let's just say, okay? Well, then you shouldn't talk about pieces of your story where you loved it, because then the message won't get across. So it's, you know what I mean? So like your intention or the message you want to get across should fit the pieces of the story that you choose to share, so people are able to get the right message. I guess that's what how I would respond to that.
Right, yeah, and there was also a question of, you know, is there any legal jeopardy that could be involved in self-disclosure, and is that a kind of a worry? And there's also some talk about not wanting family members to necessarily read some of this. So can you talk a little bit about how to make some of those decisions?
Well, all those worries can go away if you write anonymously or using a pen name that isn't you, and no photos of you are attached to the articles. I think that would keep you safe from those concerns. Yeah. And I don't, you know, legal situation, I don't know. The most common situation I hear is I don't want to use my real name because I don't want employers knowing I have an issue, and sometimes family too, like you mentioned.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are, like, you know, if you disclose a crime, right? And there are rules around that, and there's, you know, certain legality there. But like also if you know, choose to use a pen name, for example, I'll disclose my name's Jay Peters in my writing out there. I have books under the name of Jay Peters because the publisher, they won't publish it under my name because I talk and disclose certain crimes. or, certain aspects of my life involving other people and their stories that they might not want to share. Because remember, folks, it's your lived experience, not other people's. So, like, if you're talking about involve other people's story in your story, well, that might infringe upon their rights and their liberties to stay, anonymous and not wanting to be involved in a public display of some kind. So we have pen names, and there are ways of, keeping things confidential, because that was a big thing. I'll never forget, I shared someone else's lived experience in the process of talking about my own. Well, that's not cool. Keep it confidential, keep it personal, but don't infringe on other people's rights to not, wanting their stuff out there too, if they don't want it out there. It's your story. So that's great. I'm glad it was brought up.
And before everyone leaves, because we're a little bit past time, I just wanted to remind, I put this survey in there a few times. Please, everyone, fill out the evaluation, the survey about today's session, especially if you want CEUs. You need to fill that out for CEUs. But everyone should be doing it to give a little feedback about this conference and this presentation. Dan and Max, I got to jump to the next one, so I'm going to take off, but you guys can stay